and welcome to Godly Play. Come, join the circle. Lots of room. Wondering who you brought. Everyone's welcome. Find a space. Take a moment to get ready. Get your body ready. Your eyes, your ears, your mouth, your heart. Well, here we are in the circle of the church year, our calendar. And here are the great mysteries of Christmas and Easter. And we are over here in these green and growing Sundays after Pentecost. Ooh, hot. And we are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 Sundays after Pentecost. And here for us this year, that's the beginning of September, and this week, the start of school. There. There was once someone who said such wonderful things and did such amazing things that people began to follow him. And as they followed him, they wondered who he was. And they couldn't help themselves. They just had to ask him. And one of the times when they asked him who he was, he said, "I am the light." Let's enjoy the light. I see the love of God in you, the light of Christ comes shining through, and I am blessed to be with you, O holy child of God. But this light didn't stay in that one place and in that one time. He changed the light so it could be in all places and in all times. Watch as I change the light. There it goes. Going up and up. Filling the room. Going out to where you are. So wherever we are in Godly Play today, this light is with us. And when we leave Godly Play, the light will go with us then too. So you ready for a story? So our story today is found on the second shelf of the Old Testament stories underneath the story of exile and return. It's the story of the prophet Daniel. It's quite a long story, lots of parts. And if you're interested in reading more about it, you can find the book of Daniel in the Old Testament after the book of Ezekiel. The people of God were in exile. They could not go home. But the people had been in Babylon for so long that they were getting used to being there and living life in Babylon. And some of them even began to work at the court of the king. Now Daniel and his friends Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego worked at the court of the king, and God blessed them with wisdom, with learning, and with skills. Well, one day, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, had a dream that greatly troubled him. And the next day he called all his wise ones and said, "Tell me the dream I had, and tell me what it means." But the wise ones were mystified, and they couldn't tell Nebuchadnezzar what his dream had been. But Daniel was brought to King Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel prayed to God, and God told him what Nebuchadnezzar's dream was and what it meant. And Daniel said, God says that in your dream you dreamt of a shining figure with a head of gold, a chest of silver, legs of bronze, and feet of iron and clay. And as you watched, a stone was carved out without hands and was thrown at the statue and destroyed it completely. And the stone grew and grew and grew until it was a great mountain, filling up all the dream. And Daniel said, God has told me that this dream is that there will be 4 great kingdoms on the land. But in the end, God will come, those kingdoms will be destroyed, and God's kingdom will rule forever. Well, Daniel was honored among all the people of the land for telling Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of his dream. And one day, the king decided and ordered that a great statue in the figure of a person be made out of gold and put in a temple. And when certain music was played, all the people of the land of Babylon must bow down and worship the statue. And if they did not, they would be thrown into a fiery furnace. Well, Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, would not break God's law, the 10 best ways that said, worship only the one true God. And so they were brought to the king. The king flew into a rage and ordered that the fire be made 7 times hotter than it usually was. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fire, a fire so great that even those who cast them into the furnace were burned alive. But God sent an angel to be with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And when the fire was done, they walked out of the furnace, and not a hair of their head was burned. The king was filled with amazement. And he made Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego part of the high court. Now, Nebuchadnezzar had another dream. And in this dream, he dreamed of a great and beautiful tree, one so large that it filled the whole skies. Its branches were full of beautiful leaves and fruit, and every sort of bird sheltered in the branches. And underneath the branches, every kind of animal came for refuge and protection. And then the Almighty One came down from heaven and cut down the tree, and all the birds fled, and the animals left and went to the corners of the earth. Daniel prayed to God, and God told him the meaning of this dream as well. Daniel told the king, "You, great king, are this huge, beautiful, and strong tree, sheltering all of your subjects. But God will come and strike you down, and you will eat grass like an animal for 7 years. And it came to pass. Nebuchadnezzar left his kingdom and became like an animal, crawling on his 4 legs, on his hands and feet, eating grass for 7 long years. But at the end of that time, all his senses were restored to Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar returned to his throne and for the rest of his days worshiped the one true God. But in time, Nebuchadnezzar died, and his son took the throne. And his son did not know the one true God. And his son called for a great banquet, a feast for all the kings and princes and nobles of the country. And he gathered them all in one place. And it was a banquet so splendid that the king ordered that all the holy artifacts that were taken by his father from the temple in Jerusalem, the holy goblets and plates, would be brought out and used at the banquet. And in the middle of the partygoers saw fingers appear and write on the wall, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. Now, the king could not understand these words, nor any of his wise ones. And the queen remembered that his father, King Nebuchadnezzar, had asked Daniel to explain these dreams. And Daniel was brought before the new king. And Daniel asked God to help him. And he said, "These words, O king, say, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Your kingdom will come to an end, and it will be divided between the Medes and the Persians." And that night, the king was killed, and Darius came and became king of all the land. Now Darius divided the kingdom into 120 parts, and he set 3 rulers over the 120, and one of those was Daniel. Now the other 2 rulers did not like Daniel because he was the king's favorite, and they were worried that one day Darius would put Daniel as ruler over them. So they came up with a plan to trick the king into making a law that they knew that Daniel could not keep. And the law was that every time in the city, in the country, that there was a call for worship, everyone was to fall down and worship King Darius. And they knew that Daniel worshiped the one true God and would never break the law and bow down to a king. Well, one of these times, when the call came, Daniel was found in his room facing Jerusalem and praying to the one true God. The penalty for not following the rule of the king was to be thrown into a den of lions. Now, when Daniel was brought before the king was very troubled, but he knew the law was the law. And so Daniel was thrown into the den of lions. But God sent an angel to be with Daniel and keep him safe. All that night, the king worried, could not sleep because he was so worried about Daniel. And in the morning, he rushed to the lion's den and he called out. And Daniel answered and said, God has sent his angel to protect me. So the king ordered that Daniel be pulled out of the lion's den. And then the other two rulers who had tricked him were thrown in and immediately eaten alive. So Daniel was honored throughout the country, and he spent his life in prosperity and wisdom. But Daniel, he also was a dreamer and had visions. And one of his dreams, he dreamt that 4 beasts rose out of the sea. One was a lion with wings. Another was a leopard with 4 sets of wings and 4 heads facing the 4 directions of the earth. The third was a great bear standing on its hind legs with 3 ribs in his mouth. And the last was the most terrifying of all, a huge beast with 10 horns and teeth made of iron. And as Daniel watched, another horn grew out of the head of the beast, rooting out 3 horns, and this horn had 3 eyes on it. But then God came down from heaven, and while Daniel watched, the beast was killed, and all the other beasts lost their powers. And then God sent up his kingdom forever. When Daniel woke, he was very troubled by this dream. But his helper, who was with him, said, God has helped me to understand this dream. 4 kingdoms will rise from the earth. But in the end, God will come and destroy all the kingdoms of the world and will set up his kingdom, and the kingdom will last forever. Another time, Daniel dreamed that he was standing by a river, and beside him was a ram, a great ram with 2 horns, one longer than the other. And as Daniel watched, the ram rampaged all over the countryside, destroying everything in its path, getting stronger and stronger as it went. But then, out of the west, came a male goat with a horn in the center of his forehead. And he came as if he was flying, and he charged at the ram and broke the horns and trampled the ram. This dream made Daniel very afraid. But God sent the angel Gabriel to explain the dream to him. And Gabriel said, "This is a dream of the time of the ends. But God's kingdom will come and last forever." And then another dream. Oh, sorry. This is Gabriel coming to Daniel and telling him the meaning of his dream. And Daniel began to think, and he began to pray to God. He asked that God would forgive the people for all their sinful ways, for going far from the law. He asked that God would restore this great city of Jerusalem for the people of God. He remembered that Jeremiah had said that the temple would be rebuilt in 70 years, and he prayed to God that all this would come to pass. But the angel Gabriel came to Daniel and said, God has heard your prayers and has sent me to explain to you. What Jeremiah's word meant was that it would be 70 times 7 years, a much longer time than anyone ever imagined, because the sin of the people has been so great. But in time, Jerusalem will be restored. And this gave comfort to Daniel. And Daniel had another vision. And in this vision, Daniel saw a figure like the figure of a man dressed all in linen with a fine gold sash tied around his waist. And Daniel fell to the ground before him, but a hand touched him and raised him up. The figure, like a man, said to Daniel, do not be afraid. Be strong and have courage. I've come here to help you understand these visions. And he told Daniel that the power of all kings will come to an end. He explained that that time will be very difficult, but that God will be close to God's people and deliver them from all danger, and they'll live with God forever. And then the figure like a man told Daniel to keep all these things secret, and he promised Daniel that all would be well for him and for all of God's people. So I wonder, which part of this story you like the best? Which part you think is most important? I wonder where you are in this story. I wonder if there's anything we can leave out and still have all the story that we need. Well, this is the story of Daniel. This is the vision of the figure in white linen, the angel Gabriel coming to explain the visions after Daniel had prayed to God, the vision of the ram and the goat, the vision of the 4 beasts. Here's the lion's den where the angel came and kept Daniel safe. Here are the words on the writing on the wall in the banquet by the fingers. Here's Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the great tree. Here's the great idol that he set up. His dream about the shining figure, all happening in Babylon during the time of exile. Thank you for being with us in the circle today. And now for the blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Have a great week. Enjoy school. I'll see you next time. Bye.